Beneath the surface is a special place. Beneath the surface is where extraordinary happens. Designations, visiting cards, fancy cars. Now, whatever may lie on the surface, delve a little deeper, and that's where you will find the hunter-gatherer, the predator. That's where you will find lurking the real, way beneath the surface.
Hello, good day everyone. Welcome back to another episode of A Done Deal, a podcast where we get unique and relatable perspectives on entrepreneurship and leadership as seen from the eyes of seasoned entrepreneurs and investors. It is a great pleasure and an absolute honor to introduce my guest today, Tony Wheeler. New York Times famously described him as the trailblazing patron saint of the world's backpackers and adventure travelers. He was born in Britain, but grew up in Pakistan, the West Indies, and the US. His family returned to Britain shortly after he finished school. And after studying engineering at Warwick, he returned to university at London Business School, where he did his MBA. Then with his wife, Maureen, he joined the Asian hippie trail of the early 70s. And a year later, they founded Lonely Planet Publications, and the rest, as they say, is travel history. Currently, he remains a prominent entrepreneur, author, and philanthropist in Australia. And he is a man of many interests and spends his time on the Planet Wheeler Foundation, which focuses on areas such as healthcare, education, human rights, and climate change. Tony, welcome to A Done Deal.
Hello.
Well, Tony, let's get started then with what do you think of what's going around in these times, or in these unprecedented times, should I say, of using the word unprecedented and of unprecedented uncertainty. A lot of us are feeling rudderless. Many of us have never experienced an existential crisis like this. And COVID-19 seems to have thrown a spanner in the works for a number of people who had planned their gap year and are all set to go traveling. Now, with a lot of time on their hands and not much travel happening globally due to the lockdowns, what are your thoughts on how travelers and in general the generation which has lost out on travel, how can they channelize their energies and time?
Look, I always quote that American baseball player who, Yogi Berra, who years ago said, it's very hard to make predictions, especially about the future. And I think that is absolutely true, that anything we say at the moment about what's going to happen, we really have no idea. And, you know, if I, at the beginning of this year, if I thought, well, it'll be over by mid-year, by late year, we'll be traveling again. And, that turned out to be totally wrong. I think if I was saying early next year, I think that could easily be totally wrong. I really have no idea what's going to happen and how we're going to go back to travel. And I look at the statistics and figures, and I spend far too much of my life going over the coronavirus, like a lot of people do.
Yes.
Doom scrolling, as they say, is another of our words of the year.
Yes.
So I really don't know what is going to happen. I wouldn't want to make predictions, but I think that as people start to travel again, what they will start to be doing is doing things more locally. That we're going to be exploring our own neighborhood, exploring our own country, exploring our own region. There's going to be a lot of concern about safety. I mean, a lot of people aren't concerned about it.
Yes.
And I don't think that if I here in Australia, we're not allowed to travel. We're not allowed to leave the country.
Yes.
We are really locked down. But I think if I was able to go, I would go, and I wouldn't be too worried about it. Whether that's a good idea or a bad one, I don't know. But, there's the question is out there. What is going to happen and how we're going to do it? There's no question that some people have just kept on traveling all the way through this thing. That there are people on yachts who are out traveling the world, sailing the world.
Yes.
A friend of mine in Hong Kong, it
Mhm.
doesn't seem like it interrupted his travels at all. The only interruption was that every time he came back to Hong Kong,
Yes.
he had to lock down for 2 weeks in quarantine.
Yes.
So who knows?
Well, it is a strange world, isn't it? And what are your thoughts on the technological advancements, especially in areas of AR, for example, where people and VR as well, where people have these fancy headsets and they're able to explore various places, various geographies, sitting at home.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's been lots of armchair travel while we've been stuck at home effectively.
Yes.
And that can be in all sorts of ways. You know, there's been the sale of books has been very strong. I'm even though I don't own anything of Lonely Planet anymore, I am part owner of a publishing house.
Mhm.
And, you know, things have gone very well for us. The people have bought a lot of books. I was actually in a bookshop yesterday, and it's pre-Christmas, of course. People are buying books as Christmas presents.
Yes.
But there was a lot of, the cash registers were ringing up like crazy. So, you know, that element of it. People have watched a lot of movies. There's been a lot of Netflix watched during lockdown.
Yes.
And there's lots of other ways that people have even if they haven't been traveling, have sort of been traveling vicariously. One of the things I've been doing during the pandemic, I've got a lot. I've got sitting behind me in the next room are filing cabinets full of color transparencies, and I gave up taking. In fact, I sold some camera equipment today. A guy came by up a 70-300 millimeter lens.
Okay.
But I changed over to digital. God knows how many years, 15 years ago. But there were an awful lot of film photographs before that, and I've spent a lot of time and a fair amount of money going through color transparencies, digitizing them, cataloging them, and effectively traveling again, looking at these places. Oh yes, I remember that place. Oh, that one. Where was that? Researching it. You know, what temple or church or mosque, synagogue or whatever was that photograph? And, you know, going back and looking at these things all over again.
Okay, it's almost like being in a time machine where you're transported back to the days.
Well, one of my favorite time machine things from this has been Doc and what the guy's name from Back to the Future getting in his DeLorean, and Doc says, one thing, don't set it to 2020.
Well, the predictions come true clearly.
Yeah, that's the year not to go back to.
And how are things shaping up with the Planet Wheeler Foundation? And
the foundation, it's carrying on as it was before. One of the things that has concerned me all through this virus is that we know the situation in our own backyard, and we're very aware of what's happening in the first world. That the figures are out there, the statistics, the stories, the developments and vaccines, all this stuff is right in front of us.
Yes.
But there's a lot of the world which is just locked away. We just don't know what's happening at all. And I'm really concerned for those places in the world where tourism was important, and suddenly there's no tourists there anymore.
Yes.
A lot of places in the world, personally, the wine is still in the wine cellar. The cold beer is in the fridge. I may not be getting out to as many we are back into restaurants again, but there was certainly a spell when I wasn't going out to restaurants. But that's in that respect hasn't affected me. But a lot of people who I know have been, have lost their jobs, and putting food on the table every day is has become a real challenge. Yes. And I think we shouldn't ignore this just because we're comfortable. We shouldn't think the whole world is comfortable. So Planet Wheeler, our foundation, and one of the things today I had a board meeting this morning, thing called Global Heritage, which is an archaeology organization based in California, which I'm a director of. And they, you know, that archaeology, you need tourists. You know, if you have an archaeology site, you want the tourists to come there. If you're someone who runs a guest house that depends upon tourists, if you're a guide around the archaeology site, if you're running a little cafe at the entrance, whatever, you know, you want tourists. No tourists. So some of the sites that we work with, you know, that's a problem that we are looking at and we are deeply concerned about. Ciudad Perdida, the Spanish lost city, which is a wonderful archaeological site in Colombia in South America. You get to visit it, you have to walk 3 days. And a few years ago, I walked up there, and it's like a sort of more reclusive Machu Picchu. Wonderful place, but no tourists going there at the moment, and that's certainly affecting the local villages.
Yes, it is difficult on a lot of people, especially tourism, and countries who survive on tourism as a major stream of their revenues. So businesses aren't really sustainable, and businesses, or should I say, the professions aren't really as diversified as they ought to be. And how's the Planet Wheeler Foundation working with businesses and such governments to bring about change in those countries?
Well, you know, if I was looking at what I'm doing in that area, we put some money into setting up the Wheeler Institute at London Business School. Rajesh Chandy, the professor who leads that institute, when we set it up, we said, great, you know, business, MBAs, entrepreneurship, you know, that's all part of that story. But we wanted it particularly to be involved in the developing world. So a lot of the focus of that institute is not just entrepreneurship, but developing world entrepreneurship. And I know that Rajesh Chandy, who, as I say, leads the institute, a lot of his focus is in India, is in Africa. That's an important part. Now, it's not anything I'm doing personally. I mean, if I'm in London, I'll go along to sessions they have, and I've been to some really, really interesting, really amazing sessions there. But it's not something I'm leading myself. My mentor may be on the institute, but that's as far as I go.
Well, but you do participate whenever you're there. How can students start participating in this change? I'd say a bit sooner in their careers. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think a lot of them probably are, you know, going to business school with that thought on their mind. And I think probably, you know, when you're there at a business school, when you know, it's I imagine fairly easy to direct your particular interest to things that, you know, are in that zone. So yeah, I would say, you know, if you want to be involved in that area, if you want your expertise to be in the developing world, then, you know, look for courses and for projects and things that are in that region. And
you found you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. You found your ikigai, as they call it, the combination of passion, your time and you know, some sort of a monetary benefit fairly early on with your travel, with the business. You've seen how businesses have changed in the last 4 decades. How have businesses and profit targets, more specifically, evolved from the time you're a student back at LBS, learning the ropes, to the time you and Maureen set up and grew the Lonely Planet, and over the next 2 decades, you know, exited, and, you know, where you are right now with, you know, giving it back to the society and the community. How has that evolution happened?
Look, I think it's been an evolution, but even back when I was at business school, which, as I say, it's a long time ago now. It's half a century.
Yes.
The fact that business was more than just profits, it wasn't just money. It may not have been the focus that it often is today. And for a lot of people, you don't want to stand between them and a bag of money. It would not be a good idea. But fortunately, a lot of people are not inclined that way. And I think there was a certain realization that it was important to think about more than just the bottom line, even back then. But again, I think, it's up to people personally. Some people, all their only focus is money and wealth.
Quarterly targets.
Things. And for other people, it isn't at all. And I know people who are incredibly intelligent, incredibly hardworking, and the fact that they make money out of it just doesn't interest them whatsoever. And I've got huge respect for them, and I think it's a very good job we have people in this world who think that way. But there's some people, there's a bit of Buddhism, isn't it? There's balance in all things.
Yes.
You don't want to be just focused on one thing or just the other. And it's a good thing if you can do both and balance both. Fantastic.
Okay. Yes, there has been a lot of stress, I suppose, towards the concept of the triple bottom line and meeting various ESG targets, which is a hot topic these days. A lot of UN goals being met through such targets. So going back to going back half a century, like you said, when you started out, Tony, how did it start? What authors or books, travel or otherwise, influenced you in your formative years to go out there and explore the world? And is there a favorite?
I was always interested in travel. I think if I look back, how do people start? How do young people, children, get an interest in travel? People don't collect stamps anymore, but once upon a time, stamps were an element in it. Stamps, they came from all these different countries.
Yes.
Oh, look at that! This country, that country, another country.
Yes.
That sort of thing. And I was fortunate that I did travel when I was young. My father worked for an airline, BOAC, as it was then, British Airways, it later became. And as a result, but the amount of travel I did then, may have seemed like a lot at the time, but compared to the amount that people have traveled more recently, it was really not that expansive at all. But I did have a travel interest, a travel fascination, and it was, all the things that young people or children are interested in travel, whether it's the stamp collecting element, the interest in globes and atlases and the world, and you can name all these different countries. And, it was always an interest to me. It's funny, when I was at school, I ended up I studied engineering at the university, and it was maths and science and so on that I intended to do at university. But really, if I look back to my school days, the topic that I enjoyed most was history. I was a history buff.
Okay.
And I still am. A lot of guidebooks. What do? You start with the history of the country. That's what you look at in the country first of all. And that always interested me, but I didn't see it as something I wanted to go to university and study. Probably realistically, go to university, study history. Great thing for starting up publishing travel guides.
Yes.
But I didn't go to university thinking I was going to become a travel guide.
It was a non-career back in the day, right?
Yeah, back in the day, yes, indeed.
Yes. Right. And if you'd go back, okay, here's a hypothetical question, a googly. If you'd go back 30, 40 years and do things slightly differently, what would those be?
Sure. And it's like saying, if you could go to the horse races and know which wasn't going to win, you wouldn't make any mistakes at all, would you? Look, it's very easy to say, you do this differently or that differently. And, I probably, I would have paid more attention to the history lessons and the geography, less to the mathematics and engineering, probably. But that would have been a wise move. If I look back at the business, there's all sorts of mistakes we made, which I wouldn't make if I was there again. But none of them, we got down the line. It worked, so it can't have been that big a mistake. The simple thing, if I look back to the early days of the business, unlike any small business, unless you're we were not a dot-com business where you started one day and you're worth $1 billion, and that didn't happen with us at all. We grew slowly. I often said it was more like the snowball going downhill. At first, you're on pushing it to get it to turn over, but then once it starts to develop momentum, then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But it wasn't a dot-com business that started one day and was worth $1 billion the next. And like like a lot of small businesses, the early days are really tough. You're really trying to, I always say every Thursday night, oh shit, we've got to pay people tomorrow. Do we have enough money in the bank account? That was always a major concern. But if I could sort of go back and say, Tony, here's what to do differently. The one thing I would have done in the early days is I would have made everything more expensive. Think now that at $20 and $50 would have been $2 and $5. Well, instead of being 2 and 5, they should have been 3 and 7 or 4 and 8 or something.
It would have made difference.
It made no difference to the number of copies we sold. People would have still bought it at $3 or $4 instead of at $2. And we would have been much more comfortable. That'd be, if I could go back and whisper in my ear, that would be, these things, it's not as price sensitive as you think it is. Make it more expensive.
Well, if I ever happen to encounter a time machine, I will keep you posted.
That's easy to do now. At the time, you think, no, I've got to keep the price down, and maybe that worked. Maybe doing this. One of the things we did early on, and I look back, and it wouldn't have been good advice to go back and tell myself we didn't do the most sensible books at all. When we started doing the books, if we were looking at which country to do next, we didn't do any scientific research on it. And if we'd done the scientific research, the research would have said, oh, you should do that one. That's the country everybody's going to. And we didn't. We thought, no, we want to do this one because it's the place that interests us more. So it always had sort of personal touch to it. The reason we went to this place or that place, and it was our own personal interest. I think that was an important element in the success of the business. And if if it had been driven by market research, it wouldn't have had that personal touch so much, and that wouldn't have been a good thing.
So that's effectively the 5th P of marketing then. So you've got product, price, promotion, placement, and then passion or the personal touch. I think they should teach this at LBS.
I look at other. What's the car I've got out in I've got several cars in my garage at the moment. One of them is a Jaguar. It's nothing exciting at all. It's just a standard 4-door Jaguar. And it replaced the Toyota Prius. I had a Prius for a number of years, which was absolutely fine. And then I just, it's time to try something else, and I bought a Jaguar. But I remember there was a phase when Jaguar was doing really badly. And the reason they were doing really badly is that they were following market research. And the market research, you went to the Jaguar customers and said, what do you want? And they said, another car just like I've got, which is totally the wrong idea. You don't want to be telling you don't want to be selling people something they've already got. You want to be selling something they haven't got. You want to be selling them a Tesla. They've never heard of a Tesla. They don't know they want a Tesla. But that in that phase, it would have been far more sensible to market a Tesla to them than to market another dull, boring, ordinary Jaguar. Fortunately, Jaguar woke up and made much more cars like the one I've got. But
they just stuck to their strengths.
Their big mistake at one stage was following the market research.
Well, yes, it's hard to get the concept and the product market fit right in the first instance, and it is always in beta. So yes, and it would have made that difference very clearly. So, but yes, you're right. Businesses do go through cash flow issues, and unless they get the pricing right, it can mean that it could be a make or break deal for the business. Going back to travel, Tony, you've been to several countries, and from what I've read, you've been to about 170 odd countries, if I'm not mistaken.
I've been to quite a few.
Well,
not by any means everywhere. I mean, I do know people who, they've made it their life purpose to go to every country on earth. And they want to tick beside every box. And I've never set out to do that. And given the way travel is going now, I probably never will do that. But that was never a part of my travel aim.
Right.
So, but on the other hand, I have been to a lot of countries. And, if the years when I haven't been to anything new this year, actually I have. I have been to one country this year, but that was back in March. But generally, I was sort of I'd be unhappy if I hadn't been to a couple of new places every year.
Okay.
That's just because it's interesting going to new places. It's great going back to places you love.
Yes.
But it's also great going to places that you haven't been to and are not familiar with.
What countries have you not been to so far? There's no record of this, by the way. I'd be very interested to.
If this year had gone to plan, I had a trip. I was on my way from Australia. I would have been on my way from Australia to Europe earlier in the year, and I was planning to go via South America, and I was going to Uruguay and Paraguay, two countries I've never been to before. Uruguay has got Montevideo, very interesting city, interesting colonial and Art Deco architecture. Up in the north, you've got the Iguazu Falls, the border between Argentina and Brazil, close to both those countries. So, I would have gone there. Very possibly later this year, if things had gone to plan, I would have been in Africa. And I was hoping to go to Uganda, in part because one of the projects that Planet Wheeler is supporting is a medical project, is doing a lot of their research in Uganda. I hoped to go there, and ways of generating oxygen when you haven't got electricity, which is very important for people, children in particular, suffering from pneumonia, and of course with COVID-19, it's terrible, a very valid topic as well. And I was hoping to go to Uganda and look at some of the work that we've been doing there. I've been to Uganda, I've been to Kenya, I've been to Tanzania, I've been to Sudan, I've been to Ethiopia, I've been to a number of countries in that region, but I've never been to Uganda. So Uganda was a new tick on a box for me this year.
Right. Well, back in the day, it was Tanganyika, if I'm not mistaken. The three countries.
It used to be Kenya, Uganda, and Tanganyika. When it was three colonies.
So I used to collect all these stamps back in the day, and there was this particular stamp that caught my fancy, which was a triangular stamp. It was that big, and it had Tanganyika. So that's how I recollect that the three countries combined.
That rings a stamp collecting bell.
Oh yes, I loved philately. In fact, if I remember correctly, I must have had about 10,000 stamps growing up, and we used to trade stamps in class, in session, that is. I was quite crazy, and I hope to pass on that to my boys. And
I don't know. I think stamp collecting is not a dead hobby, but it's not the hobby it once was.
yes,
Um,
we have emails these days, which makes it, a lot easier. Because
yeah,
if this was about, let's say, 20 years back, I would have probably written you a letter and you would have received it with a
yeah, that's
stamp. And
these are things that we don't do anymore. We don't. I did mail a letter yesterday, but it's very unusual to put a stamp on an envelope and send something. Pretty much like it's very unusual to write a check.
Yes.
I've got a drawer and there's a checkbook in it. But if I pulled that checkbook out, I probably haven't written a check in 6 months.
Wow.
And when I have to write one, I'm sort of a little bit upset. You mean I can't do this online and see it happen immediately? It's a strange activity, writing checks these days.
It is. It is, in fact. That's one of the reasons this year I've taken this special initiative with my boys to post Christmas cards and New Year cards to friends and family back in the UK and the US.
Well, I'm just about to do the opposite. That I maintain sending Christmas cards, and this year I've just put it off and put it off and put it off because of the pandemic to a certain extent. And I'm just about to send all my normal Christmas card receivers are about to get my Christmas email message instead. So I think I may have. There probably will be somebody who doesn't get it. I remember postcards.
Yes, postcards.
Postcards they're a rather wonderful thing. I just threw out. My mother died a couple of years ago, and I've just thrown out her postcard collection. They've all just gone. I kept sending postcards to two people, to my mother and my wife's aunt, both of whom were in the 90s at the end. They both of them lived. One lived to 94 and one to 96, I think it was.
Okay.
And they were and I remember going to countries where you could buy the postcards quite easily.
Yes.
But very often getting the stamps.
Yes.
Was a major headache.
Yes.
So I in a way, I was the last person. I felt I was the last person sending.
And then there were these inland envelopes which came pre-stamped, and
paragraph,
right? And you could, yes.
Yeah. now it's all email, which is a sad story.
Yes. Yeah. Have you ever been to Antarctica, by the way?
Yeah, I have. And funnily enough, when Antarctica is a place that people think it's sort of, I've been everywhere else and now I'll go to Antarctica. And remarkably, people, when they go to Antarctica, seem to, well, that was very nice. I'd like to go again.
Okay.
And what we, not everybody, but an awful lot of us, the first Antarctica trip is you go down to the south of South America.
Yes.
You go down to the Antarctic Peninsula.
Yes.
And there are very good reasons why you do that. It's the shortest trip. It's the region with the most, you get to see the penguins and the seals and whales, and you see all the things you want to see.
Yes.
There were a lot of even abandoned scientific bases down there, so you can go around and see that. People go down and they see that and they think, oh, fantastic. But then they, I'd like to go and see where the polar explorers started off, and that was they didn't start on that side of the continent. They started on the other side, because you could go down from South Africa or Australia or New Zealand, and you could get much closer to the South Pole. So Scott, Amundsen, and Mawson, all those early Antarctic explorers, they generally went down that way. And a lot of people who develop an Antarctic enthusiasm, having been to the Antarctic Peninsula, then want to go back and go to the places where the Antarctic explorers kicked off from. So Antarctica is one of those places you may go to it once, but then you want to go again.
Yes, there is something more with the adventure, and as seafaring people, humans often tend to do something to get out of their comfort zones every now and then. And then there are people like Elon Musk, who's planning a manned mission to Mars. So did you reckon there would be a Lonely Planet Mars edition in the offing?
Oh, look, we not for me. I mean, I'm way too old as well. But I did go down I went to Baikonur in Kazakhstan a few years ago to see a space launch. And this was, there was a tourist going up to his dad was a genuine NASA astronaut. And he was not a NASA astronaut, but he was a very wealthy computer game entrepreneur. And he paid the large amount of money which you need to go up on a Soyuz space launcher and go up and have 2 weeks on the International Space Station. And I think there have been 8 or 10 people who've done the training course in Moscow, paid the many millions of dollars that it requires, and gone up there. And I went down to see the space launch. Sergey Brin and Barry Page were amongst the spectators when I went there. And, it was fascinating. The whole thing, start to finish, was absolutely fascinating. And I'm really glad I went to see it. But personally, I have no ambition to do it myself at all. I just think it's a complete waste of money. You could find much better uses for your money than doing that. And, if I was thinking, well, I'm going to spend 6 months doing something interesting, I wouldn't spend it going to learn how to be a cosmonaut or an astronaut.
Right.
No, thank you.
Well, it is a bit.
I don't. Yeah, off you go, Elon Musk, but not for me, thanks.
Well,
or the Richard Branson. I mean, even more stupid in my mind is the Richard Branson. Okay, you go up there. Oh, there's the Earth down below. Down again.
Don't forget the selfies.
No, you could much more interesting go up on a hot air balloon. I have spent a little time up on hot air balloons, and it's been fabulous. Every time I've done it, I've really enjoyed it. And it wasn't 8 minutes. It was often an hour or two. Over Myanmar, over Australia, over Turkey.
Turkey,
loved hot air balloon I've been on. Was terrific. Great.
Wow.
You get a better view, and it's a longer lasting experience.
Well, it sure is. It sure is. But who knows? In the next 20, 30 years, space travel could become the norm.
And I don't see it at the moment, but then who knows? I mean, I was just reading. There's a lot of talk about when we do get back to travel again. Will our concerns about climate change, and there was so much talk before everything shut down. Oh, stop flying. The whole world's economy depends on it. We're travel obsessed. We want to jump on planes all the time. We can't cut back. We could cut back. Suddenly, all those planes disappeared from the sky. There they were, and a lot of them are still parked. And a lot of them are going to stay parked forever and never coming back. And I wonder, when we do get back to traveling again, will we be quite so blasé about jumping on planes and going to the other side of the earth? But then I was reading some articles yesterday about hydrogen and fuel cells and how we can travel in more environmentally sensitive ways. And maybe it's not going to happen in the next year or two, but maybe fuel cells will become ways of travel. Maybe I've got a friend who's a little bit science and engineering obsessed, who is messing around with hydrogen power at the moment, and just his own little workshop. And people do these things.
Well, work. Well, the power equation is changing. In fact, incidentally, I'm working on financing one of the world's largest blue energy projects, which is essentially taking salt water and mixing it with river water, which is clean water, and then producing electricity from the salinity gradient. So there are different technologies coming up, and you never know. And with battery lives improving,
some of them will work. I mean, hydrogen power. I think a lot of the problem is just how do you store the hydrogen?
Exactly.
That
That's
question
the key.
hasn't been answered yet. But then, the battery question wasn't
Yes.
answered. And suddenly it is being answered. And, electric cars are,
Yes.
becoming much more popular, becoming more, and, and I think they will continue to grow like crazy.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
one change we can see happening as we look around right now.
And with passionate people like yourselves, with the government supports and support, and with I would say the general transition, we'll get there. I'm conscious of time as well, and just to conclude, we come to that part of the podcast which we call the rapid fire round, where I present two options, and of these two options, you choose the one that you prefer more between the two. Okay, here we go. Marmite or no Marmite?
That is completely the wrong question, because the question usually is Marmite or Vegemite.
Oh, Vegemite.
Because Marmite is the British one and Vegemite is the Australian one, and I hate both of them. So the answer is no.
No. Okay. Cricket or rugby?
Again, the answer is no.
No.
I'm a great believer in going to things, and if there was the cricket. I've been to cricket and rugby matches. But do I have an enthusiasm for either of them? No.
Okay, the next one then. Flaming Sambuca or a mojito?
I don't even know what a flaming Sambuca is. But mojitos, like a lot of people, I've fallen in love with Cuba. When I've gone there, I've gone to the bar where Hemingway used to get his mojitos, and I can do a pretty good mojito myself. So mojitos.
Oh, nice. Copy luwak or filter coffee?
Coffee.
A luwak, the coffee found in Bali.
The one where the coffee beans pass through the digestive tract of the small mammal, and therefore unique coffee flavor.
Yes.
Oh, look, worth trying as a tourist. I think I want one of those Italian coffee machines that looks like a V12 Ferrari and smokes and burbles and makes the right.
So a cappuccino then, or a cafe latte then?
A cappuccino. I'm happy with cappuccinos. I'm happy with cafe lattes. I like the complex machine making them.
Right. Beach or mountains?
Both on the same day, if possible. Places where you can lie on the beach, and I get bored lying on beaches in 10 minutes. I'm not. If I want to read, I'd rather do it comfortably, sitting back in a chair rather than on a beach. But I love mountains as well. I've been walking in the mountains in the last week here in Australia. Up and down, and it keeps you fit.
Yes.
And I'm a keen scuba diver, so I'll have either. Yes, please.
Mozart or Queen?
Oh no, that's. I like both. I do like music. My wife, who's a real opera fan, has a much greater endurance for opera than I do.
Endurance, I like that.
15 hours of the Ring cycle more than once, so definitely I can say that I've got my opera tickets in there. But equally, I'm a rock and roller, so. In that case, I said to Marmite no and no, and
yes and yes
Mozart,
in this case.
Yes and yes.
Okay, and finally, book or podcast?
Oh, I've got to say book. I do listen to podcasts, but not very often. I'm not a great podcast listener. Okay. Whereas if you ask me book, paper, or tablet, I probably read a lot more books on tablet these days than I do on paper, but I still like books as well.
Is there a favorite that you're reading these days?
Sorry?
Is there a favorite that you're reading or the one that you're reading these days?
No, I just read whatever comes by. And, I do a lot of reading, and people ask, will you read this book and give us a blurb line for the cover? Or will you read this book? We'll talk about it on something.
Okay.
So yeah, a lot of my reading, it's not enforced reading, but it's will you read this? Rather than
could you? Yes. Okay, then I'll definitely come back to you with a request to have something for my upcoming book, maybe in a few months' time. But Tony, based on thanks ever so much for your time, by the way. And one final question before we conclude: do you think the world's become a lonelier planet in the last year or so?
Yeah, a lot of people have asked us. We got the name more or less as a joke, but it's been used a lot. And one of the things I have seen it used as, I've read more than one sort of scientific article where the space telescope or the satellite or whatever has detected a planet around some remote star. Yes. And the article has been headed "Lonely Planet Discovered." Yes. And it's rather nice that that. And I thought, well, I know where they got that from, and that's really nice that they have used the name in that way. But on the other hand, there's no question that we are living on a lonely planet. We're, as far as we know, this is still the only planet that has life on it, and we haven't always treated this planet with as much respect as we should. So I think it is a lonely planet, and it concerns me that in some ways it is becoming a little bit lonelier. If I was going to say something we should be doing with this planet is saying it's a lonely planet. Let's respect it for that.
Yes. On that note, Tony, thank you ever so much again for your time. And for those wonderful insights, nuggets of information on this podcast. I really enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you did too, and I hope the audience does too.
Thank you very much. And we can get out there, keep traveling.
Yes, words to live by. Thank you ever so much again, Tony. Well, folks, that's all for today then on another episode of A Done Deal. Thank you for listening in, and please do subscribe to our podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Signing off then. Have a great day. Bye-bye.